before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that if you like the Deal Zone shirt, because who doesn't like the Deal Zone? Who doesn't love Windy, our guy? You can buy it. There's a link in the description. Definitely check it out. There's also the Maxi Better Sadly shirt and other merch you can get in mugs, shirts, hoodies, whatever you want. So definitely check that out. And also remember to like and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate your support. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and today I am very excited to have onto the podcast for the first time from SBNation, the NBA editor and a clutch plant, Harrison Faigen. What's going on, Harrison?
You know, things are good. I'm ready to spread some clutch propaganda. I'm ready to talk about, you know, Ben Simmons returning to play, Nets back to contention. Let's go. I think all is good.
How's Anthony Davis doing? Is he healthy?
Yeah, no, he's 100% healthy. He's like ready to dominate at the 4 this year. You know, finally he's gonna have that size mismatch. You know, just really take guys down in the post. It's all good. And
Awesome.
And his 3-point shot shooting like 80% from behind the arc.
Wow.
During open run. Yeah.
Wow, we're taking it back to the bubble. We're Mickeying it up. For those who don't know, Mike Missinelli famously called Harrison a clutch plant on the air. I have to put the tweet in the description because it is one of my favorite Missinelli clips. RIP to the Mike Missinelli show, a Philadelphia classic. But the reason that I'm having you on today is because we want to talk all about the slop that has been dropping. I don't really know what like this stuff is, but we have to get what we can from it, because obviously LeBron resigns, and we'll get to that at some point. The Westbrook thing is always ongoing. Those are like real things that we can actually talk about. The KD stuff, I don't really know what to make of it at this point. You know, Shams comes out with another article today that says that the Grizzlies are interested, but they don't really want to trade anyone for one of the 15 greatest players of all time
with an insulting offer, but they've registered their interest. You know, it's like at this point, you know, he said Western Conference contender. I no joke was prepared. I opened the article expecting it to be the Lakers have reached out to the Nets about trying to get KD. I was like fully prepared for like the offers have gotten that disrespectful that the Lakers are now like, yeah, we'll give you Russ and like maybe the 2027 first. You know.
Well, to be fair, you know, Shams does have some journalistic integrity. He would never call the Lakers contenders.
They're a contender for this year's play-in title, I have to say. You know, it's twice in 3 years. Like you got to hand that to them.
I honestly did think when I first saw the headline, which was I see the Shams tweet that says notifications. Of course, everyone tags me in it. And I go in and I expected it to be the Nuggets was like the team. Because I was like,
that would be interesting, actually.
Because they're one of the teams, like, if Jamal Murray is the center of a package, then that's interesting. Now, I don't think that the Nuggets are the kind of team that would make that kind of move, but you do have one of the greatest players of all time in the middle of his prime, just came off back-to-back MVPs. Trading for Kevin Durant certainly would not be the worst idea in the world. But basically, this article comes out and says the Grizzlies are interested. Sham says they offered 5 firsts, and then to make the salary work, they would have to include like Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, and Danny Green. like, what are we fucking doing? What are we doing here? This is Kevin Durant. Why are we still getting these offers 2 months after his trade request?
Well, I think actually Ricky O'Donnell had a good article for us at SBNation today asking that exact question. And it's basically, I think the reason is because no other teams are offering anything better. And so all these teams are just like having let's insult the Nets off, basically, of like, let's offer them not really that much, but like just enough so that we're not being totally insulting, but also like we're not going to let any of like, you know, with the exception of the Celtics and Jaylen Brown, like right. We're not going to let any of our core players be included in these rumors. So, you know, they won't be upset with us, but you know, we're kind of like, I saw there was a report like the Pelicans have made like Brandon Ingram untouchable in like Kevin Durant trade talks. I'm like, I like Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram's good, but that's clearly like the Pelicans putting that out there because like there's no you're not making an offer if Brandon Ingram is not
Exactly.
involved. Like, that's not a serious like pursuit of Kevin Durant. And so I think mostly, the Raptors are saying we aren't going to include Scotty Barnes. So like none of these teams are offering their quote unquote best package. And so I think that's why you still have all these sides that are stalemate, and why Kevin Durant is clearly pissed off and like he's demanding, the firing of the coach and GM to see if he can be annoying enough, I guess, to get them to just trade him. But like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying his best to do the James Harden thing, but it's just not like he hung out with Harden. He took some notes, it's just
Could you
not
imagine
really
if he
in
showed
his
up
nature.
and he was like fat at training camp, like Kevin Durant?
Yeah,
He's
it's
like,
impossible.
I don't think he's probably been
metabolism is too
trying
fast.
all summer and he just
Yeah.
can't do it. Like he's like slouching in pictures, like trying to get like a bad angle, to like look bad, and it's just he can't do it.
He's
like
eating McDonald's every day. He's
5,000 calories a day, like not
he's
working
on the Michael
out.
Phelps diet. Like it's nothing. Nothing's gonna work for that man because
his metabolism's just too strong.
It's just too quick, and because of that, I do feel as though with all of the bad offers and shit, it feels like this is definitely going to drag into training camp and into the season, just due to the fact that, look, if Jaylen Brown and Derek White and a first-round pick are the best offer that have been made so far, the Nets are probably just going to sit on it because they're not. Once again, one of the things that we keep talking about with the Kevin Durant thing is like, I think that because Durant and Cy are kind of mashing heads right now, and because Sean Marks and Steve Nash are against Kevin Durant, if they just let Kevin Durant go to a team that he wants to go to, and they don't get back a decent haul, and like, as they've said, they want every single asset possible, then it's going to be a bad look. And they want to win the press conference. Like, they don't want to lose the press conference the next day, because all they do is just lose over and over and over. Like, every time they get stars, something goes crazy. Every time that they're competitive, something goes crazy. And they're just looking for a win. So I think the fact that Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a first-round pick, which isn't like the worst offer in the world, but at the same time, it's Kevin fucking Durant, and you can't let one of the 15 greatest players of all time go for, a borderline all-star, a very good player, and then also a role player in Derek White and a first-round pick. Like, that's not going to fly.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that obviously these are different situations, but the other thing that we have to look at with the Nets thing is, exactly what, your guy Daryl Morey did last year with the Sixers. Everybody said all summer long, you just got to trade this guy. You can't deal with the headache, whatever. Like, I think the Nets, all you have to do is wait for one team to kind of, for a situation to come up where one of these teams feels like, okay, we just need to get KD right now, and let's just make ourselves better, make ourselves more of a contender, whatever. And then you can get what you want. Or, in the Sixers case where Harden's demanding out. And so maybe Brooklyn's waiting for a situation like that where somebody else is asking out that they really like, and they can kind of like swap headaches, I guess, sort of like the Sixers and Nets did last year, where, and, obviously get some assets back in return, but I think they may just be hoping for the situation to change. I mean, there's no, they can go into training camp and have it be totally dysfunctional or whatever, because that's probably better for them than getting a bad return for KD and really just like kind of hamstringing their future. And I think to some degree, they, you imagine Cy is not a guy that's used to folding and just like giving other people what they want in a business transaction. And so, I would imagine that he's not like, no, Mark's just trade him for whatever. I don't want to, deal with the headache of this, whatever. He's probably like, F this guy. Like, we're going to wait and we're going to do this on our own terms. And, that's just how it's going to be. And,
The only conspiracy theory I've heard that makes somewhat sense to me for why people are lowballing them so much was from a buddy of mine. And he basically said, the only thing I can think of is that the people know the situation is so toxic there right now that Cy might push Marks to make a deal he might not want to make just to get him out. But as you said, he's not going to be a guy that wants to lose the deal. He doesn't want to lose the press conference. He doesn't want to have it look bad on the organization when you have the greatest player who has ever played for your team to just basically lose him for not really that much. But it really is very similar to the Sixers situation from last offseason with Ben Simmons, except it's Kevin fucking Durant. Like holding
except
on
for it's like, it's like a top like 20 to 15 to 20 player easily of all time, so
still top 5-ish, like whatever you consider him.
Yeah.
I mean, at worst, he's like the 6th or 7th best player in the NBA. You could probably argue as high as 1 or 2. Like, I mean, like he is. Just not that long ago, people were saying this was the best player in the world, and that's been my whole thing through this. But the Nets bargaining the message that they're sending out to the media is essentially exactly what the Sixers sent out, which is, we're okay with running it back. We're totally fine.
That's what we've learned the last 2 off seasons is every team, no matter how much they all hate each other, they're okay with running it back. They think they can fix it until they trade the guy. And then it's like, we had to trade him, Do you think that before Ben Simmons left the group chat, KD asked him for tips on like how to stage a successful holdout? Like, you think that's really why he left?
Yeah, he was probably getting tips from Harden on how to get a trade request out when he was in Europe, and then he was probably picking Ben Simmons' brain on how to officially hold out. But the difference is that Kevin Durant actually likes basketball.
The game. He's going to the 2 best in the current field that he's choosing to pursue and just picking their brains.
It's true. I mean, it's brilliant, really, if you think about it. He's just shadowing them, but at the same time, the big difference to me is that Kevin Durant loves basketball and Ben Simmons hates basketball. So like that feels like a major difference to me. Like I think Ben Simmons was just like cursed to be his size and have his skill, whereas Kevin Durant is like, I eat, sleep, like everything is basketball to me. So
I feel like if he held out, we'd see him like playing at a YMCA and pickup games or something. Like there would be like viral footage of him playing with like a 24-hour fitness.
It would be like the lockout seasons when all those guys would just get together and just like play.
Except for just Kevin Durant. He's just going and like staging pro-am tours around the country.
I'd pay for that. Honestly, just KD absolutely destroying some plumbers. It would be like, watching Jordan in the 90s. But yeah, so it does feel as though
that took me a second. That was so casual. It just took me a second to realize what you said.
I was going to say Bob Cousy and Jerry West, but I didn't, I know you're a Lakers guy, Jerry West, whatever. But,
I mean, you could say, look, that's good for your podcast. You're just looking out for your brand. You get Jerry West to come after you, take you all the way to the Supreme Court. Like,
good point, actually. Yeah. You want to come after a podcast.
A class action case with all the guys he used to play against. Like, he's like, no, they were defamed and called plumbers for too long. Taking JJ Redick and Trill Bro Dude to the Supreme Court.
That's right. Yeah. Equal level of podcasters too. Just as good as basketball as well. Yeah. But, so it is extremely similar to the Sixers positioning from last year. Like even down to like, we think we made our team better. We think we got TJ Warren, whose foot is like Michael Scott in the episode of The Office where he grills it by accident. We have, we're getting Seth Curry we got Seth Curry for shooting. We're bringing it. Joe Harris is going to come back from injury. We think the team that we put around them, and like in theory, it's not the worst argument in the world if you're trying to gain some positioning. In reality, if Kevin Durant doesn't play, it doesn't fucking matter. And if he does play and he's not locked in and he's not Kevin Durant, then it doesn't fucking matter. Because if he's taking any notes from James Harden will tell him, hey, go in and just fucking stink it up. They'll trade you within a
I got
month.
A great deal on a fat suit at this website. And, it looks totally real.
It won't look real on you, but it certainly look real on me.
Yeah.
But like, I to your point from earlier, like, I actually think waiting, and I talked about this with Matt Brooks, and Matt was like, the deals aren't necessarily going to get better. Like Matt's argument was, it's possible that the offers get worse. The Celtics start off and they're really good, and they will be, by the way. Like they'll probably be the number 1 seed or number 2 seed in the East and look awesome and all of that. And they might not want to break up the core and the chemistry and blah, blah, blah. And then maybe Jaylen Brown is off the table. But what I said was, like, when you have a player of Kevin Durant's caliber, I think you hold out for the best offer just because you're losing Kevin Durant. Your future is not going to be as good as when you have Kevin Durant on your team. And of course you want to maximize it. But if the difference is, if Jaylen Brown is off the table, that might be a little bit different. But if it's the difference between 1 first-round pick you're losing in a deal, I'm not going to lose my mind over it. But just kind of like going back to what you were saying about the deals in general, like by January, DeAndre Ayton will be tradable. I know that sounds very far away. It's not really that far away. The season starts at the end of October. Then you just have to get through end of October, November, December. And by January, you can trade DeAndre Ayton in season. And you have Ayton, Bridges, and all those Phoenix picks, which to me would be very appealing. Because one of the things I keep talking about is I don't really care about quantity of picks. Like, give me, like, you hear about 6 firsts, 7 firsts for Donovan Mitchell or whoever. Give me 2 quality picks. Like, the Celtics got 4 picks from the Brooklyn Nets in that heist of a trade that everyone always references.
Is that
2
including
of them,
the swaps?
That's including the swaps.
Okay.
2014, 2016, 2017, and 2018. So they got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and then they flipped one of the picks for Kyrie Irving. The other one was James Young. He turned out to not be an NBA player. But, like, they got 4 quality picks. Like, one was 18, one was 8, one was 3, one was 1. If I'm looking towards a team for picks, and this is one of the things why I said I actually think that the Sixers offer isn't the worst thing in the world, is because the quality of those picks in 27, 28, and 29 could be extremely good. And I'm looking at teams like the Suns, who are going to be old if they make that trade, and the Sixers, who have a often injured Joel Embiid, and then James Harden and Kevin Durant would be old. Like, that's the kind of deal that I'm looking for if I want to go the picks route.
Yeah, and like the thing that I think sometimes when we talk about these picks, we sort of like, we don't put in context in our brains, like they almost don't process how far away like 2027 and 2029 are. We're talking, so much of the discourse is like, well, yeah, but if that team gets Kevin Durant, they're going to be really good. Are they going to be really good in 2027? Are we sure that Kevin Durant is making them really good like that far out? The thing that I became an expert in talking about 2027 and 2029 first round picks this year with covering the Lakers, because, we did the math, and the way that we started referring to it on the site with the 2027 pick was like, that's the Lakers are offering, Taylor Horton-Tucker, Kendrick Nunn, and an 8th grader around the league to see, what they can get on the trade market. And when you put it in that perspective, it's like, this is a current 8th grader. There's like barely any scouting on, like, that's how far away that is. Kevin Durant is not going to be making that team good still. In fact, it's probably going to be the opposite. They're probably going to be on the downswing because they had all these years of contention where they don't have necessarily this young core that they're developing, where they're going to be in for some lean years, potentially right as you're getting set to cash in those picks, which is again my argument for why they should trade KD to the Lakers.
Exactly. There you go. There you have it, folks. You're like, oh, what a pre-podcast. You're like, what do the Sixers have to offer? And you're like, the Lakers, though. I don't know.
Yeah.
You seen Austin Reeves? I'm just saying. I know he's 29 already, but he's got.
How dare you? He's like 25, I think. Like
he's 24. I think he's going to be 25 next season. But just that's why I talk about like the quality of picks thing. The biggest argument against that is, well, Sean Marks doesn't give a fuck. Sean Marks might not be the GM of the Nets in 5 years. What does he care about picks 5, 6, 7 years from now? And I totally understand that, and I hear that. It does seem like he has pretty good job security to me, though. I mean,
he's won a job security battle with Kevin Durant.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're going head to head with not only Kevin Durant, but also I know Kyrie has his own issues, but he's went to head with 3 of the 75 best basketball players of all time on his team. He's traded one of them already. He might trade the other one for Russell Westbrook and 2 first-round picks. Who knows? And then also you have Kevin Durant, who you're going head to head with right now, and he will not get fired. So I think his job security, if he wants to stay in Brooklyn,
alternate governor, like there's clearly an extremely high level of respect, for him from Joe Tsai.
Absolutely. So that is the one argument that, like, there aren't many guys in the NBA that I would say have. Now, look, nothing's guaranteed. You never know when you're going to lose your job in the NBA due to whatever. But I would say, like, other than like maybe Presti and like Pat Riley, like those are like the only other 2 that I could think of. Maybe Brad Stevens, but like he's still pretty new at it, and like I think that he's obviously done a great job. But there's only a handful of guys I would think have better job security. Masai, like he's in the top 5-10 in terms of job security in the NBA. And if that's the case, I don't think going after a picks deal is the worst thing in the world. But like, if you could get, like, right now, I know the offer from the Suns is like Bridges, filler, and a bunch of picks. But like, if it becomes Bridges, Ayton, and a bunch of picks that you think could be really good in even 3 or 4 years, because like, yes, they have Booker. That is a factor in it, because Booker's one of the 15 best players in the NBA, and he could continue to get better. Like, he's a really hard worker and all that. But if I'm just thinking from a true, like, I want to try to get good players and picks because they seem to want to be competitive now. I don't necessarily know if Bridges, Ayton, and good quality picks deal is better. I think it might be better than the Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a first or two or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, you're really testing me here because I'm not supposed to say anything nice about the Celtics, but like I would actually still sort of lean the Celtics offer just because,
Sure.
I think
Jaylen's
you
really good.
kind of want to get the better player. And well, I guess you're sending out the best player in the trade, but in terms of a guy who we think can still grow and, be that kind of, number one, number two option type guy, like Jaylen Brown is, I think, the only one to me that's that. Ayton,
Sure.
as nice of a career as he's had, like, probably tops out as that like strong number three. I'm not sure that I see him as like a 1 or 2. And so I would still lean the Boston package, but I see what you're saying. And I do think that the Suns, have, as long as the Nets have some level of interest in Ayton or think that they can swap him for something that they do want, because all the reports, leading into those negotiations, and again, everybody's like leveraging each other here and kind of, covering themselves in slop. But like all the reports were that they did not want DeAndre Ayton. And so maybe that's kind of a factor here, and maybe that doesn't matter when he becomes available. Although I guess like that allows you to loop other teams in, but then even then, like 3-team trades don't happen that often at midseason, just for roster complication reasons alone and all of that.
And the
stuff.
one team we knew was interested was the Pacers.
Yeah.
And they cannot trade for DeAndre Ayton until next.
And even they apparently weren't that interested because they gave him like the easiest to match offer sheet in the world.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were interested to an extent, they didn't want to fuck up their flexibility and all that stuff. We like you, but like that much. But
he's like, you don't want to throw in a trade kicker or anything? And they're like, no, that's okay. Like,
it's fine. They're not going to match it. Don't worry.
They won't match. We just really want to sign you to a legitimate contract. And
they get the Shams notification 10 minutes later, and they're like, fuck.
Man, who could have seen this coming? Sorry.
So before we move on from the KD stuff, there's two things I want to hit on here. One, is Bill Simmons just coping when you listen to these podcasts? I've listened to the Bill podcast. Bill has been so set on, and a lot of Celtics fans, by the way, I would say the overwhelming, and I totally understand it, by the way. You just got to the finals. You've been to 3 Eastern Conference finals with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Well, 3. They've been to 3 with 3 with those guys. Jaylen Brown has been to 4 technically, but he was a rookie and he didn't really play that much when he was young. But they've been to 3 conference finals, a finals. Who knows? Maybe if they get better health, they win the finals. They have better depth going into this year. Like, I totally understand it from the Celtics perspective and Celtics fans not wanting to make that trade.
Well, and also this is fandom, right? Like they're still like, I can, speaking from experience with this, there's still debate among Lakers fans about whether or not, like they should have given up as much of the young core as they gave of their young core at the time as they gave up for AD. Like when you watch these guys grow, you get attached to them. It almost doesn't matter if you win. I mean, it matters, obviously. Everybody enjoys the title too. And, there were a lot of fond memories about that team until they systematically sort of self-destructed over the last 2 off seasons voluntarily. But, like if you're, I think most fans, they've watched these guys grow. It's the same way that you feel about like Tyrese Maxey, and you're like, oh, gross. Don't put him in a KD trade. He's untouchable.
Well, I actually, he's KD's one of the few players that I would include Maxey in a deal for. It would kill me.
I respect your honesty and objectivity, because I know that there's something like there were Grizzlies fans I saw today. They were like, why would we include Bane? And it's like, I mean, Desmond Bane's good.
I love Desmond Bane. Maxey and Bane were my 2 guys pre-draft, and I absolutely love them. And they're honestly better than what I expected. Like I expected them to to both be
Yeah,
like
I was just
good
saying,
role
like, we
players.
view these guys through our kind of fandom covered lenses, and we are more attached to them because we've watched them kind of grow and, all of
Sure.
this stuff. And I think that that's got to be a factor when you're discussing like any of this stuff. Like, of course, Bill Simmons doesn't want to just, as like the biggest Celtics fan in the media, does not want to like lead a charge against Jaylen Brown. Like, oh no, we gotta ship him out right now for KD.
Right.
It's like, no, I mean, he watched this guy grow into,
Of course.
he watched that like it really fun for them, I'm assuming, less so for me, but fun finals run last year where they came up just short, blowing multiple games and clearly just ran out of gas, and now they're deeper. Like, I mean, I can understand it from Celtics fans perspective where it's like, wait, you want us to give up like two pieces of our core and picks for this guy who like kind of just demanded out and who we just swept in the first round? Like, I mean, I get it. I still think, again, like, I think you should make a trade for Kevin Durant if you can.
Right.
I don't know if that's a hot take, but I understand if you're a fan rooting for these guys day to day, why you would be hesitant to give up that much.
Yeah, I totally understand that, especially when you see the other offers. Like, that would be the biggest thing for me is like, why are we the only team giving up Jaylen Brown?
And that's the reason why, like, you haven't seen the Raptors like include Scotty Barnes. And like, circling back to the beginning of our conversation, it's like all these teams are like, we don't have to include. Why do we have to include our best guy? These other guys aren't doing that.
I haven't even heard Pascal Siakam's name be included. Like, not
Yeah,
let alone
now that
Scotty
you mentioned it,
Barnes.
I don't think I have. What are the Raptors offering?
Yeah, like the Raptors are just like, look, Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby. I'm just saying,
like, Svi Mikhailuk has got a lot of room to grow. Okay, he's non-guaranteed. If you don't like what you see in training camp, you could let him go.
There you go. The Malachi Flynn. Have you been watching the pro-ams? Malachi Flynn, 74 points. Come on, he's basically Kobe 2.0 is what
Maybe
I'm trying to say.
They're just offering Nick Nurse. They like saw the flirtations with the Lakers, and they're just like, no. I mean, maybe you're not happy with Steve Nash. We will trade you Nick Nurse for Kevin Durant.
There you go. I think that's a fair deal.
He can play like concerts at your stadium on the nights that you're not playing. This is like extra revenue for the team while you're rebuilding.
Giannis for Brad Stevens 2.0. Nick Nurse for Kevin Durant.
Nick Nurse for Kevin Durant.
Let's make it happen.
Who says no?
Hey, look, the Nets have traded a coach before, haven't they? Didn't they trade traded Jason Kidd to the Bucks? I think so.
Yeah, they did. You're right. It was like they got like a second round pick back for him after he staged a coup.
Yeah, honestly, great value for Jason Kidd.
Maybe that's what Kevin Durant's trying to do. He's like, I just tried you traded Jason Kidd for a second round pick after he staged a coup. So now I'm demanding that you fire the president of basketball operations, and then you'll trade me for a second round pick. He's studying up on the greats. He's a real student of the game.
But like, I once again totally understand. But the thing that came from that, which it's one thing to, and this is something that I try to be objective with on the podcast. As a fan, obviously, like, it would kill me to see Tyrese Maxey go in a trade. I love him. I was like, don't include him in a Harden deal. Like, don't include him in whatever. Like, and by the way, there have been times where I've been tempted to include him in just to capitalize on Embiid's prime. Like, I think at one point I was throwing him out there for Bradley Beal deals, like that kind of stuff, until he became the player that he became now. And we know how far he can really go. But all I'm saying is, like, when I come into these conversations, I try to be as objective as possible, because I'm thinking from Daryl Morey's brain. I'm not thinking from my brain, because Daryl Morey, I know he has said Tyrese Maxey is like untouchable. He also said he wasn't going to trade Chris Paul. He also said he was going to try to bring back Ben Simmons. Like to his credit,
he's a liar, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. And to his credit, he's made a lot out of bad situations in the past, and he's done a pretty good job. Not the Chris Paul situation necessarily. I think the Ben Simmons situation, all things considered, he came out somewhat unscathed, although, who really knows?
I mean, he came out a lot better than most people thought he was going to when Ben demanded the trade. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And I totally understand that. But at the same time, like, I'd be lying if I were sitting here and was like, yeah, no, he's not going to include Tyrese Maxey for one of the 15 greatest players of all time, a guy who was an MVP candidate, back-to-back season, scored 50 points in a playoff game like a calendar year ago. Like, I know that he is going to include him if it is. The Nets, apparently there's no real traction on that. And I just want to say, you can clip this, come back to this part of the podcast. When Tyrese Maxey makes the All-Star team next year and he's in the conversation for most improved player, I want everyone in the media, including Waz, who was on that podcast, to just give Tyrese Maxey his respect, because I think it's insane that people are like not considering how good those Sixers picks are in the future and how good Tyrese Maxey really can be as a player and a prospect. Like his leap from year 1 to year 2, if you look at the history of players who make that leap from year 1 to year 2, they almost always make at least 1, 2, 3 All-Star games in their career. Like that's how much he improved from year 1 to year 2. I expect the same from year 2 to year 3, which is when they make that leap into the All-Star conversation. And if you compare him to guys who would be in the same conversation for Kevin Durant trades and no one would bat an eye, if a guy I brought up earlier, Jamal Murray, Tyrese Maxey is literally a better shooting Jamal Murray from his second season if you compare it to Jamal Murray at the same age. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying that the Nets should do it. I'm not saying that it's 100% realistic, because I don't think they will for a lot of factors. But I do think that the deal, like where Maxey could be, his potential as a player, like I don't think it's the most insane thing in the world to include Maxey in picks. And then Tobias Harris has a bad contract, but it's only got 2 years left. And he's still a fine player. Like he's still a good player.
Yeah, I mean, if they're trying to win now and be respectable, he arguably somewhat helps them. I mean, we know he can play with Simmons. And you know, as a clutch plant, I'm inclined to agree with everything you just said about Maxey. I think, you know, multi-time All-Star. The future is bright for that young man. Max contract in the future. You got to wonder, are the Sixers afraid to, you know, pay him that? Like maybe they do need to send him to Brooklyn for, you know, to reunite with Ben Simmons.
And like the big thing that I've talked about is like there is value in having guys on rookie contracts in a way for these star trades, because everything just falls apart for the Nets all the time. And it might be nice to have a little bit of security of like a guy, you know, is probably going to want to be there. A guy like like everyone loves Maxey. Like that's just kind of how it is. And he's on a rookie deal still. So you're going to have him for 5 to 7 years, whatever. Like I think that there is some value to that, but like, the other team that Bill brought up on that podcast to me, and by the way, I actually don't hate the package that the Warriors could build. Like I think that if the Warriors were able to offer Poole and Kuminga, I like Moody more than Kuminga, but like if they offered those 3 and picks and then salary filler, the problem is the salary filler is going to be one of your best players. Like that is what the issue.
Even then, like if Kevin Durant hadn't just been there, we'd be talking about the Warriors as like the front runners in this debate. You know, like if he had signed with the Wizards, you know, or you know whoever, he had stayed with the Thunder, he had gone anywhere else but the Warriors during those years between Oklahoma City and Brooklyn, then you know we'd be talking about the Warriors. This would be a no-brainer. They'd be doing it. You know, they would be the most light years thing they could do is after winning a title, you know, backstabbing one of those guys and bringing in someone better. You know, like you know Joe Lacob wants to do it. Like
absolutely.
He probably is like they have to tell him daily why he can't just trade Draymond for KD. You know, and like
he's like, wait, what? Hold on, I gotta pay this guy how much money on his next contract, and then times that by the repeater tax on top of that.
Oh my God. Pull up the analytics on Draymond again. I don't. So like I think we'd be talking, but we just saw how much the Warriors are more as aware as anyone other than Brooklyn, how much not fun it is when Kevin Durant is not having fun and not happy. And, you know, if he doesn't want to go there, and I'm sure that there's been, you know, I'm sure they know whether or not he would like to be there and would like to return. And my guess is that given that they have not become a serious suitor, is that interest does not really exist on both sides for probably human reasons.
Exactly.
As much as anything.
And Durant, like, the reason Durant is asking out is because Golden State just won another title. Like, that's at least part of the reason. He's not going to be like, yeah, send me back to Golden State and we'll win another. Like, that does nothing for his legacy.
And because Sean Marks is being super uncool about Kyrie only wanting to play half the games. Like, it's just, you know, he's just not being chill about it. Like,
yeah. I mean, how dare he, first off? How dare he?
He's just only one of the Brooklyn Nets voting board. You know, it's like KD, it's Kyrie, it's Joe Tsai, it's Sean Marks, and it's DeAndre Jordan. And, you know, they have him outvoted. And
He's not even on the team anymore. He's on the Nuggets, and
he's
still call
on.
him.
He's still on. People don't realize this. He's still on the Brooklyn Nets decision making, board.
That's what. Hey, look, we're paying you all this money still. You're gonna get the.
You got to jump in on the conference calls, DJ. Sorry,
Oh wait, no, the Detroit Pistons are paying you. Never mind. We don't give a shit. Which is insane that this would be actually the last year of that DeAndre Jordan contract.
And the Nuggets paying him first minute of free agency. Just had to get that done.
Of course. I mean, you can't lose it. Look, when you can land Jordan the first minute of free agency, you got to do it.
No, the thing that we would always joke about with like the Mozgov signing at like literally like minute 3 of free agency, you can go back and find like the Woj tweet. There's all this like there's this whole like Mitch Kupchak is the Boy Scout. He never tampered, whatever. And you can kind of talk yourself into it still being true, because if someone offered Timofey Mozgov a max contract 2 minutes into free agency, by minute 3, that report that he has accepted it is going to Woj. Like they're not waiting.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing. He's like, wait, like a fully guaranteed veterans minimum? Yeah. No, I'll take it.
Mozgov definitely responded to that text like, is this a prank? Or did someone steal your phone? Are you doing a bit right now? I don't understand.
His agent had to mute the phone when they got the call from the Lakers.
Literally it's like fucking Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street.
It's like, Timo, you're taking it. You're taking it. You're not getting better than this. This is way beyond our projections.
Also, you get to live in LA. You're not going to complain about that, and for not very long. But so we've talked about all of that. I don't think the Warriors are a realistic suitor. I don't think that the Sixers have enough. I think it will probably come down to the Celtics. He said they're still in the driver's seat, but the Kyrie thing is a factor here. Do you think it's just positioning? Do you think it's just we're not trading Kyrie because basically optically if we bring him back and he's he buys in and blah blah blah, or do you think that they actually do want to bring back Kyrie and try to remain competitive and potentially let him walk for nothing in a year?
Something about watching just last year, it's like it's the same thing that I talk about when I talk about Russ and all the trade rumors about him. It's like just seeing last year from afar. Like I didn't follow the Nets particularly closely, like I was covering the Lakers day in and day out. So like I you saw a lot about the Nets, on all the media spheres that we all tune into and whatever. But like I just have to imagine that after last year, nobody's like gung-ho about bringing Kyrie back. Like there's no one in the Nets organization that's like, I think it's just going to work this year. Like I think he's probably pretty motivated to kind of like, all those doubters, he's just going to prove them wrong. And our team, they weren't healthy. They weren't vaccinated last year. This year we're getting them back together. There's no vaccine mandate. It's all going to go great. I'm sure Kyrie's not going to come up with any other reason to get upset with us or skip games or tune out at times. It's like, I just don't buy that the Nets actually believe that. I do buy that that's what they're telling every single team. It's like when all these reports come out, like the Nets are projecting that they will not, make Kyrie Irving available, whatever. Like that's what they have to say, because they have to put on the illusion that they're willing to bring this back. It's the same thing with the Lakers and Russell Westbrook and how we had like 6 weeks of like hilariously laughable leaks that they're like, no, we're just gonna run it back with Russ. We think, this year he's gonna play defense, he's gonna lock in on those corner threes, like he's gonna cut off the ball, he's gonna do all these things that he has not done in like 15 years. We think this is the year. All these teams have to
the reason why he fired his agent because he didn't want to do those things.
It's because he believes in the Lakers so much that he didn't want to hear this agent disparaging the Lakers, and all of these things. Yeah, it's just like the whole fact that the agent came out afterwards and was like, yeah, like he wants me to get him to buy out and I can't financially recommend that. Like I have my reputation, like he's going to end up like, this is not a good decision. And so I'm releasing an open letter to Woj, as one does when they're a true professional. And
very normal.
That was, God, I forgot about that until like this moment. And that was such a weird situation. But anyway, like taking it back to the Nets with Kyrie, I don't buy that it's like their first option. I do buy that they're projecting that out to everyone and all around the league, and that they're maybe to some degree willing to do it just because maybe it allows them to keep KD, since that seems to be by all indications, it seems to be that the thing that he is upset about is that they were, like I was joking earlier, they were just super unchill about Kyrie only playing in like half their games or whatever and not offering him an extension after he basically was like, yeah, Sean Marks, co-worker, co-manager of this team with me and Kevin, just all the erraticness last year. I doubt it's their first option, but I think that he seems to be the most upset about them like not respecting Kyrie. So I don't imagine that until there's a KD trade that they're even really taking or fielding serious calls about Kyrie. And I think that the second KD is traded, they are going to try and, send Kyrie out as fast as possible. But if he doesn't get traded, then maybe they see Kyrie as like someone that can kind of weirdly, Kyrie has gone from like the guy that's blowing the team up to maybe the guy who could kind of like help it come back together. He's like, look, Kevin, I'm fulfilling my original 4-year commitment to the Nets. Like, I'll see you in the fall. And maybe that makes Kevin Durant like show up and see him in the fall. This is what Kyrie's been projecting the whole time. He's reaffirming his commitment, and maybe that gets KD to do the same thing.
And one of the things that they talked about on that Simmons podcast that they've talked about, I've heard in the media, is like, look, the Nets will be a good team if they bring back KD and Kyrie. They'll have, they'll now have, they let Bruce Brown go, but they have tall Bruce Brown now coming in to fill the Bruce Brown role in Ben Simmons. And they have, a lot of shooting around those guys.
I got to cut you off. That it's super Bruce Brown. That's what we're going for at Clutch.
Super Bruce Brown. Yeah.
He's been cleared for Bruce Brown activities.
Actually offensive to Bruce Brown because Bruce Brown shoots threes now. So I apologize to Bruce Brown for comparing Ben Simmons
like 90% during these offseason workouts. Higher than AD. He outshot AD the other day.
So I keep forgetting you're a clutch plant. Damn it. So the thing about that is like, yes, they do have a lot of talent on paper. Sure, the Nets have always had talent on paper. The reality is you're going to have an unmotivated KD, an unmotivated Kyrie. Who knows what the fuck is going on with Ben Simmons? I've said like time and time again, like I think they will still be a good team. Like offensively, they're going to be awesome. Defensively, a lot of defense's effort, communication, being locked in. I think that defense has potential to be a real disaster because I think that people think that, oh, you have Ben Simmons, your defense is going to be good. That's not how it works. When Joel Embiid was out for the Sixers defense was not held together by Ben Simmons. Ben can be part of a great defense. He cannot be the Draymond role, rim protector, guy who switches everything. Like he has facets of that in his game, but it's not who he is as a defender. He's great as a lockup guy on the perimeter for sure. Very, very good on-ball defender when he wants to be. But I do think that like it's possible the Nets could just like get into the season and absolutely fucking fall apart. And I care less about the KD offers getting maybe tiny bit worse. Like I still would hold out for that. The Kyrie offer is like, the Lakers seem to be the only team that are actually going to make this offer.
That's the other thing is the Nets know who they're going to trade Kyrie to. Like It's not like the Mavericks are not going to like come in here, even though like there was some kind of early on like, oh, maybe he could be like kind of the lead ball handler, and then like somebody from the Mavs texted Tim McMahon like fuck no or something like that. like that was like a real thing on a podcast.
No.
Like yeah, he's like he just like brought up the idea, and like Mark Cuban went to his house and cussed him out. Like it was
if Mark Cuban doesn't want you, if you look at Mark Cuban's history of signing wash stars and guys who were past their prime, the post 2011, I need to do a podcast on that at some point about the post 2011 Mavericks and how he just made a whole line of, no pun intended, of just cocaine-addled moves. It seemed like just insane moves that no one would ever do in their right mind. If he doesn't even want you, it's got to be pretty bad.
Yeah. No, I mean, and so that's the thing with Kyrie is the Nets know where that package is coming from. It's a matter of whether or not, like, will the Lakers give them 2 first-round picks or will it be 1? And, all indications now, from every single report that we get these weekly updates on, like, are the Lakers including both picks in their offers? And it's like for Kyrie, generally the consensus seems to be, yes, they are. And so, it hasn't happened yet because I think Brooklyn is still, like, holding out hope that, they'll bring somehow Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and Kyrie into camp, and everybody's going to be like kumbaya and like come out like, working together, and it's all gonna it's all gonna gel, and because it's really their only option right now. But yeah, I think that they know where they'd send Kyrie, so that's the other reason why there's like less about him now, other than in like every single Shams article we have to mention that like Kyrie has like reaffirmed his commitment to the Nets. Like they're like that couple that keeps renewing their vows. Like that's what Kyrie's doing. He's like every week he's having a contract renewal ceremony with the Nets in front of Barclays. Like
yeah, no, they're madly in love, Kyrie and the Nets, for one more year. He's made it specifically like, no, everything's great, by the way. I'm going to fulfill my contractual obligation, which is what you always say when you're happy in a situation. You're like,
yeah, no, Kyrie was so happy that he sought permission to seek trades, and figure out like whether or not he could get something. And then he was so happy that he's like, maybe I'll just take the mid-level with the Lakers. And then the Nets are like, okay, good luck, dude. We'll see if you do that. And then Kyrie decided to reaffirm his original 4-year commitment to the Nets after he found out that, he ran the calculations, on his computer, and he's like, oh, the mid-level is like a lot less than what I'm making this year.
Oh, the taxpayer mid-level? It's not even the real, it's not even the Jay Crowder mid-level.
Taxpayer mid-level, yeah.
PJ Tucker mid-level? Like, yeah, he's like, oh no, I'm not getting Furkan Korkmaz money. No, thank you. But I do have one last thing I want to say on Kyrie before we move on to LeBron re-signing. And we'll bring up Kyrie at a certain point too. But I have a thing with Kyrie. I have an idea, a little bit of a theory. Remember a few years ago when Kawhi won the title with the Raptors? And everyone was like, he should just be a mercenary. Just go to a new team every year.
Every year.
And just win the title somewhere else.
Every single year, just changing
teams. Just go somewhere else, just changing teams. Kyrie really needs that. Because if you look at I feel like
that's like Kevin Durant's actual like greatest role. Like I think that's we figure it. We just may have solved how to make both of them happy. They just go around mercenary the whole league.
Yeah, they could just go around the entire league, make teams better, kind of like Chris Paul. Maybe have them contend, whatever. But with Kyrie, the first year always goes so well. Like the first year when LeBron came back in Cleveland, and even into the second year, like they won the title that year. Then things fell apart after that. When he goes to Boston, everything's great at first. He gets injured eventually, and, the team ends up being really good without him, which I'm sure he didn't feel great about. But, like, all things considered, it seemed like everything was going great there. In the playoffs the first year with the Nets, he was awesome. He's averaging, like, 25 a game. He looked like the best that he's looked in years. Like,
the Nets looked it cannot be overstated, like, how unstoppable they looked during the opening rounds of that playoffs before everyone got hurt.
Yep. And we were just like, it was a foregone conclusion that the Nets were going to win the East and probably the title because of the fact that Kyrie looked so awesome and Harden looked so awesome and KD looked the best that he's ever looked. Like one of the reasons why, if I'm the Lakers, that I'm actually like, other than the Russ thing, which is its own thing, that it's just completely unsalvageable, even though, as we said, they can pretend like they want to save it. Kyrie in his first year there, I feel like if you just get decent health from AD and LeBron, having Kyrie and those two, first year Kyrie, locked in Kyrie, tries on defense Kyrie, is not going to completely phone it in and blow up the locker room Kyrie. That's going to be a contending team and could potentially win a title. Like to me, that's the only route that the Lakers have of all of these packages that we will talk. It's the only one where I would take them seriously as contenders. And I would think that they actually had a real shot to win the title.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the same thing that I've been saying all offseason, is that is their only shot. Like, maybe it doesn't make them, the number 1 seed in the West or whatever in the regular season, but that does give you enough top-end talent that as rotations get shortened, if you go into the playoffs healthy, you can talk yourself into that team winning, winning a few rounds at the very least, with, like, the amount of good players that they'll have and the amount of, like, offense that they'll be able to create. Defense will be a whole other thing, but again, like, if they can find enough mismatches that they can, be able to, with LeBron, AD, and Kyrie, be able to kind of score their way past teams at times, then, they'll be in pretty good shape. And he's also like such a good fit with LeBron and AD from a basketball perspective. Like, the whole thing with Russ last year was like, would he be a different type of player than he's ever been before? And, it was sort of like, maybe this is the point in his career where he actually will kind of do some of those things. Like if there was going to be a time, it would be in his hometown on his way on the downslope. That was not what he wanted to do. And he's just like such an atrocious basketball and personality fit at this point that even for me joking about how uncommitted and how unreliable Kyrie is for this entire podcast leading up to this moment, like he is a perfect basketball fit with those two guys. And, I think there's a lot to be said about it, even though it's the same thing that we all talked ourselves into here with Russ last year, where it's like, maybe this is the year when he becomes reliable and kind of like does winning basketball things. With Kyrie, again, it's like, there's all these reports and like kind of rumors and whatever that maybe he needs a new Nike deal to secure that. And, if he's in LA, playing, for Kobe's franchise, like as the ultimate Kobe disciple, like that's going to be extremely marketable
with
for him
LeBron.
With LeBron, on the marquee franchise in the NBA, like that beyond the contract stuff, whatever, like for him, if he can keep it together long enough to get, multi-year deals that he can then go back to doing Kyrie things, then, that gives the Lakers a pretty good shot.
Yeah. And it is funny to me because I as you just explained that in my brain, I was like, it's almost perfectly identical to the Sixers situation from a year ago with Ben Simmons, where like everyone was like, well, why do you want James Harden? Like James Harden just quit on his second team in 2 years. I'm like, hey, at least he plays the fucking games. Like Ben Simmons isn't even playing the goddamn games.
It's so also like it's the same thing where like he's such a clear fit upgrade over Simmons with Embiid. Like, even on one leg with,
sure
15 extra pounds or so.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, obviously, Harden and Kyrie have their own issues, but when you can get them locked in, somewhat healthy, and giving a shit on the basketball court, they're still extremely good basketball players. So there's that benefit to it. Whereas Simmons was always a clunky fit with Embiid, his playoff issues, everyone knows about them. Russ, and I've talked about this with the Russ thing, and we'll just get into the Lakers, the whole thing with the Lakers now, because first off, what has happened to the Lakers over the last 2 years is kind of blows my mind. I don't think I've ever seen a move like the Westbrook move that was basically universally panned the day after it happened. Like, I remember doing a podcast being like
the hour after it happened.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck are they doing? Like this is like, I'm the kind of guy that when I come on to this podcast, I'll like hate a deal at first. And then over the course of a few days, I'm like, you know what? Maybe the Rudy Gobert trade wasn't that bad. Maybe this trade wasn't that bad. I never got to that point with the Westbrook trade, and most people did not. And I can't remember a time that a trade has just been so panned by everyone. And literally, I can only remember one person talking themselves into it, and it was, funny enough, it was Waz from The Ringer, because he's a big LeBron guy.
I thought you were going to say me.
Did you talk yourself into it?
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
well, you're also a Lakers. You cover the Lakers. Like,
well, also, look, I'm fully willing to acknowledge that I am not a genius basketball mind. We all get stuff wrong sometimes. And I was, after watching the Lakers of like the last two, or I guess, the last season, because it was only one season between the title and it was the weird pandemic shortened season. I was sort of the mind that, hey, Russ, he's sort of like, he's like a better version of Dennis Schroeder, and the version of that team with Dennis Schroeder like healthy and playing was pretty amazing. And so, it was sort of the thought process of they need a little bit more dynamism. LeBron's not going to be able to handle the ball every single possession for, like going into year like 47 of his career. And he's going to need some help in that respect. Russ is a guy that at least, the narrative on Russ is that he plays hard all the time. And, from watching him a lot on national TV, watching like the ridiculous stat lines, like that was something that was in my head too. And hey, maybe he'll be sort of like an energizer bunny for this team, and he'll give them a little bit more dynamism. He'll make them more fun in transition. And, it turns out that none of that, pretty much none of that was true. It was a horrible personality fit, in terms of in the locker room, like his resistance to feedback, just basically like hating Frank Vogel from day one because I guess he didn't like appreciate his like gift of champagne enough. I don't know if you saw this bizarre story.
No. What's this?
Did you watch Russ's exit interview?
No.
You need to watch it. It's like 15
I've
minutes.
heard about it.
It's like Michael Jordan's like Hall of Fame speech levels of, but it's like if Michael Jordan was like bad at basketball and then he was getting inducted into like the bad basketball Hall of Fame and then was like airing out all of his grievances. Like it's sort of like that, and where he's like talking about, he's like, yeah, I never really got why Frank disrespected me from the beginning. He tells the story about how he like sent champagne to Frank and his wife's hotel room on their anniversary, just like totally unprompted. No one asked about this. He's like, and then he's like, yeah, but I just felt like we never got on the right foot. So I guess you'll have to ask him. Like the day after Frank was fired. This is like the day.
So why was he mad? Why was he mad at Frank Vogel because he sent him but he did not thank him or something?
I guess I don't know if it was that. Maybe Frank Vogel didn't send him a thank you card. Given that Frank is like the nicest man on the planet, that seems unlikely. He probably like hand wrote him a thank you card. And it was more just like, Frank like asked him to do things that he didn't want to do, despite Russ like sending him like champagne on his anniversary. I guess.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
He's like, yeah, he's like, he didn't say this, but it was basically the tenor of it was like, I did this nice thing for him, and then he asked me to like cut off ball and like screen for LeBron and do all this like all these stupid things. Doesn't he know I get like triple doubles and I'm an all-star?
Yeah.
Like that was sort of the connotation of it, and it was one of the most unself-aware interviews I've ever watched.
Well,
and
he didn't know that Frank Vogel listens to Zach Lowe and Kevin O'Connor clearly, because they were the ones that were like, you gotta screen, you gotta cut, and
I was on the same boat. Like, and honestly,
of course,
there was one game where he did it. There was one game where he did it and it worked super well. Zach Lowe brings this up, and like, it's not an exaggeration. I wrote, or it was either me or one of my writers at the time wrote a story on it the next day. Like the points per possession were good. It looked good. It looked like they were building something, and then they just like never did it again because Russ was like, that sucked. Like if we're gonna win, I don't really want to do
role
it like
player.
That.
Come on, what am I doing?
He like feuded with like Phil Handy, like who is again like one of the most respected like player development guys in the entire league by like everyone.
Even Kyrie loves him.
Yeah. Even like it was just this. It was a truly bizarre year, and I just like I don't even remember what your original question was at this point. But this was like a therapy session. But
we're on
like,
a DMT trip. We're doing ayahuasca.
Yeah, it was just like. It was bizarre from start to finish. It never worked outside of like one fourth quarter, where he set ball screens for LeBron and like did the things that you would need Russell Westbrook to do. There was like probably like one or two games where he tried on defense and it looked okay, but that's just not who he is. And, it really says something that this is the point that I've been making all summer, is that it says something about how bad the Russ experience was, that people are like, oh, the guy who like voluntarily like sat half the games last year and like has a crippling YouTube addiction and just like will just leave the team sometimes for whatever reason, like that is such a clear upgrade in personality over Russell Westbrook. Like it's just like I don't see any way that they could bring him back and do it again. And again, I say that as someone who was sort of an optimist about it. Like I saw on paper the ways that it could work and made the mistake of going with like, well, so that's how it will work, and not considering, the downsides.
So I remember I never talked myself into them being like a contender. I never talked myself into them being like a legitimately really good team. I remember saying on the podcast, like, they'll be good in the regular season. Like they'll be like in that like 4, I think it was like I said maybe 3 to 7 range, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Because they have LeBron and AD. Like they're going to be good. Like that's just how it is. Like when those two are healthy, they're going to be good. I was worried about the playoff. Yeah, exactly. And I was worried about the playoffs really, because I just watched the Sixers play the Wizards in the playoffs, and Russ was amazing that second half of the year, leading when he was finally healthy again. And in the regular season was like they were coming back in these games and he was doing the triple double thing again, but he actually looked good. And like, I was, the Wizards, they make this run to the 8 seed and then they play the Sixers in the first round, and Russ was terrible. Like once again, terrible.
This is Doc Rivers who schemed Russ out of the game.
Yes. because Russ schemes Russ out of the game.
Yeah.
Because Russ is just like, I always joke that when you play against the Warriors and Steph Curry hits a three on like one of the first, like comes off a screen and hits a three on one of the first few possessions, you know you're fucked. When Russell Westbrook hits a three early in a game, you're like, fuck yes, we won. He's just going to keep shooting all game. He's never going to stop. Mid-rangers, threes, he's going to try to take over the game, and that's what's going to sink this team. And it happened in the playoffs multiple times. I swear to God, they were letting him get whatever he wanted early in the game so that they could just basically have him play them out of the game. And that's why I always hated this trade from the jump.
There may be something to that. It's like the old stories Bill Russell would tell about how he would after they had like secured a lead, he would let Wilt like get some of his moves off just because he's like, I know I can block that one later. And I am like such a basketball savant that I'm just that I'm just going to let him do this until they get like a little closer, and then I'll swat a shot. But I gotta pick and choose because I can't let him know that I figured out like that move yet, and I don't want him to make adjustments the next time we play. And you know
exactly. And when you're playing against one real basketball player, Wilt Chamberlain, and a bunch of milkmen, it's really easy to do that.
The Jerry West class action lawsuit is coming now. You know, this is unbelievable.
YouTube's gonna take this video down for slander.
There's gonna be like a Better Call Saul. It's gonna be Sweet James, the local advertiser, in LA, personal injury returnee. He's like, have you been personally injured by a podcast comment from JJ Redick? Like,
or Trill Bro Dude, the podcast terrorist. So LeBron resigns. Obviously, I was kind of surprised. I'm not gonna lie. I really did think that if the Lakers weren't willing to play ball, it seemed like they were really just like, we're not mortgaging our future, because you were a big part of the reason why we traded for Russell Westbrook. You got together with him in the offseason with AD. We're not going to give up our future because you basically wanted to play with a guy who you don't fit with, all of this shit. LeBron obviously resigns. So he has 1 year where he's now the highest paid player in NBA history. Good for him. He has 1 year left on his original deal. He gets 2 years and he has a player option on that second year. So he's really locked back with the Lakers for 2 more seasons. And the reason why I wanted to have you on is we're going to rank realistic Westbrook trades in a second. But other than the Kyrie thing, is there anything here that you think could get them back to like realistic contention and help LeBron win his 5th title and kind of solidify his legacy? Not that he needs it, because he's already at worst the second best player of all.
Yeah, I love solidify his legacy. It's like,
of course.
he's
he's look, as long
down
as
the home stretch here, he's got to lock it in.
Exactly.
That was 2 years ago he won a title.
Hey, what have you done for me lately, huh? You missed the playoffs 2 times in your Lakers tenure. You lose in the first round, but my whole thing on this is like, I think that it is important to LeBron that he tries to win another title. Obviously, I think it's important to the Lakers that they try to get another one up, because the Celtics might, I don't know, Celtics look pretty good and they might end up passing you guys in titles. And that is a bad look for the Lakers. It's a bad look for LeBron. All of that. What's going on, guys? I am excited once again to talk about Philly sports trips, because the Eagles season is right around the corner. They look awesome in practice on both sides of the ball. The offensive line's been dominating. A.J. Brown is making insane catches in practice. 2 preseason games are down, and we only have 2 more to go before the Eagles season. So definitely check out the upcoming Philly sports trips that they have planned, specifically Week 3 in Washington against Carson Wentz and the Commanders. It's going to be awesome. They're trying to get 1,000 Eagles fans down there, and they want to basically make it like a home game. So you can go there. You can get a great tailgate filled with food and drink. You can also get accommodations via the bus that they're going to be taking down. They're going to be taking down tons of buses, and you'll be able to boo Carson Wentz. So what's better than that? The Eagles will get a win. You can yell at Carson Wentz and enjoy great food and drinks with 1,000 other Eagles fans. So check out the link in the description and book your trip to that. So is there anything that they can realistically do this offseason heading into next season? Because I really think that these last 2 years are like the last like the 2 years you have LeBron, you have to do everything in your power to just compete and at least give yourself a shot to get to the playoffs and win a title.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that last part, which is why I would still be in favor of trading the both first round picks if it gets you that sort of upgrade where you feel like you're at least in the title conversation again, or you could talk yourself into it just because I mean, look, I don't know if we're all going to be alive in 2027 or 2029.
All right,
Like we're,
Zach Lowe.
it's just I've been saying this for a lot longer than Zach Lowe. I'm just saying, it's just how are we going to plan that far out? You've seen the state of the world, so let's go try and win a title one last time with LeBron. Like they're not going to have probably a better shot than this in 2027 or 2029. Whether they keep those picks or not, and so you go all in around a guy that again, like him and AD just won a title together 2 years ago before they decided to detonate the roster 2 years in a row. And so I think you have to go all in. But that said, I'm not really sure that I see the package. Like the NBA is super unpredictable, as we've seen from where we just spent an hour talking about a Kevin Durant trade podcast, which, if you would have asked us a year ago, 6 months ago, we would not have foreseen that being a thing that we were going to be spending an off-season podcasting about. And so
we're like, he just extended. Can he even get traded? What the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. And so anything can happen where all of a sudden it's the same principle as the Nets are probably waiting on right now is does something crazy happen that allows us to get a better deal for Kevin Durant? And then we'll take that one. And so, maybe that deal comes into the picture, but no, I mean, the deals that are being kind of bandied about right now is realistic or there's the Miles Turner, Buddy Hield multiversal, Buddy Hield finally ends up on the Lakers with a 97 team trade, after, the whole thing going back to last summer where it's the Lakers suspicious. They got just enough space to kind of take in Buddy Hield in the sign and trade, or they're going to send out Dennis Schroeder. They're going to loop him into this transaction, and people for a week talk themselves into, this deal was secretly done where Buddy Hield was coming with Russ. And so, maybe they finally get Buddy and Miles, and that makes them they'll be a playoff team pretty easily. Sure. I think at that point, Miles Turner would be a really good fit with AD. I think he's a guy that would look a lot better in Los Angeles. I think, again, Buddy Hield, a guy who, as long as he can kind of catch LeBron passes, because we've seen guys throughout his career weirdly struggle with that sometimes where they're not good at being stationary shooters. But as long as he can do that, again, guy who hypothetically fits better in Los Angeles, I still don't think that makes them a real contender, barring some injuries or maybe a Dallas last year level contender where some stuff happens that we weren't expecting and they get hot at the right time and, they're able to kind of get themselves into the title picture. But then there's the Utah deal where it's Patrick Beverly and Jared Vanderbilt and all this. And it's that's depressing. That probably makes them better, but not that much. That gets them, I guess, firmly into play-in range. I don't know, and there's there were, earlier there was Knicks kind of rumors, analysis, whatever.
Yeah, I have 5 teams or 6 teams written down here, and these are all the teams basically.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe you want to throw some deals at me, but I'm not there yet where I necessarily see the deal beyond Kyrie that makes them a shoe-in contender.
Sure. So I think I agree with what you're saying. I have it ranked Nets in their own tier. Number 1, obviously, goes without saying. Kyrie makes you a contender instantly. Because the issue with the Lakers is that not only do they not have the top end talent outside of LeBron and AD, they also don't have the depth. I've been trying to figure out who their third best player is all off season. I don't fucking know.
Because I've been thinking about this a lot too.
I mean, Lonnie
is it
Walker,
Kendrick Nunn who was so good that when he missed last season, it's what caused last season to go under? They just, they never got to see themselves with Russ.
Exactly. They just got to get Nunn in there, and then that will do it. Thomas Bryant, I don't even know what he looks like anymore. When was the last time he played extended stretches of basketball? Those are the kind of guys that we're talking about. It's not good. And because
it's the theoretical version of Thomas Bryant is probably their third best player. But we don't know if that guy exists anymore post a bunch of lower leg injuries.
Exactly. So that seems to be the issue here is not only do you not have the top end talent, but your depth is bad. And if that is the case, you got you at least have some guys that have, because they're young, they have theoretical upside, but they're not guys that I've ever loved. I don't think Troy Brown Jr. is particularly good. I don't think that Like anyone on that team doesn't really blow me away as a two-way talent that you would need to play deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, even Lonnie Walker, like, I've seen some, like, I think my guy Cranjus McBasketball did like an analysis over at the B-ball index, did an analysis of like best bang for the buck in terms of like last year's production for the mid-level. And if I remember correctly, I hope I'm not misquoting his whatever, maybe I'm making this up, but like I think Lonnie Walker is generally seen as one of the less good mid-level exception signings.
Yeah.
And again, I'm breaking my facade as a Clutch client to reveal that information, but like he's not universally seen as like a coup on the mid-level. Where
well, that's revenge because they let
KCP
KCP go, so you're just making up for that.
Yeah, well, no, Lonnie is also again a Clutch client. Like it's,
but
just
he's
like,
no KCP.
Yeah, no, he's not. He's not. I mean, earnestly, he's not.
No,
and
seriously.
Yeah. KCP better than people realize, like genuinely.
I've said it on the podcast for a while. I was pushing so hard for the Sixers to try to get KCP at the deadline. If you go back and you watch Slopfest, I was like, please trade for KCP. Like he would be the perfect kind of fifth starter.
KCP is a hilarious player because he's like 90% of the time he's like really, really helpful. But then, I had this like semi-viral tweet a couple of years ago where I was just live tweeting a game and I was like, KCP is like has one play per game where he hallucinates that he's LeBron James, and you never know how it's going to turn out. Like it's either like poster dunk where you weren't sure that he could dunk before, or it's like he lobs it off the top of the backboard to himself, but it like hits the shot clock. And
it's amazing that you had Danny Green and KCP as like the third and fourth best players on a championship team.
Like when they're maybe the most worst lob throwers to ever be on a team together at the same time.
The most chaotic role players of all time in terms of
it's like half of AD's highlights from that year are just him like reaching back like behind his leg to catch like a KCP or Danny Green alley-oop pass. Like
that's why he has all these injuries now.
Yeah.
He's still recovering from the lobs.
Thing. They're throwing hospital balls. Like it's just
hospital lobs.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's funny that we talk about KCP and Danny Green because that seemed to be
easily be the third best player on this team.
Still, even Wash Danny Green would be the third best player on this team, clearly.
Yeah, currently ACL injured Danny Green might be the third best player on this team.
Playing on the torn ACL, he comes back. He's like, back guys.
Like, yeah, he's got those veteran smarts, He's his whole leg's in a cast, but he knows what he's doing out there.
But like seriously, like they kind of had the formula with the 3-and-D guys, with guys who are pretty athletic around them, with guys who can, just basically do the role player things that you want guys around Anthony Davis and LeBron James to do. And every time I come back to these rush trades, other than the Kyrie one, like it's basically let's make a worse version of the 2019-2020 Lakers that won the title, because of the fact that they've made all of these reactionary moves for some reason. We got to move on from Danny Green. Like, wait, why are we including a first round pick to move on? And like, I actually didn't even hate that move at the time.
No, but it's all the moves, if you look at like each one of them in a vacuum, they're not that bad. But when you do them concurrently and they all don't work out, it's like, it's like, oh my God, like this team went from title contender to this team went from winning the title to missing the play-in game in 2 years, because it's like they kept being like, oh, well, you know what? I think, you know what I think the answer is we need another real hooper, like we need another, guy who can go get a bucket. And it's who cares about another first round pick that became Desmond Bane? Like it's, it's.
Oof. Wait. Oh, okay. Cause they traded, would they have the 22nd or 23rd pick in that draft? 2020?
Yeah, it was the one attached to Danny Green. It either became Desmond Bane or he was still available in that range and had been campaigning to go to the Lakers. Went on the Lakers Nation podcast that summer because he grew up such a big Laker fan. Said it was hard to work out in Miami during the finals because he was telling everyone how much he loved the Lakers, and they traded that pick with Danny Green for Dennis Schroeder.
Wow, and as someone who loved Bane pre-draft. And I cannot think of many players who's a better fit with Anthony Davis and LeBron James than Desmond Bane. Absolute
amazing,
good
it's
defender.
In retrospect, that was an oopsie, It's like, oops, we traded for Dennis Schroeder, who everybody ended up hating, and potentially allegedly revealed that LeBron in a German interview, because who's going to translate that in 2020, that LeBron didn't take the vaccine and then went into health and safety protocols 97 times going into the playoffs. you know,
Jesus Christ.
could have been Desmond Bain, but
And also
who's
they were
keeping track?
lucky. They actually got lucky that he turned down that contract extension, by the way.
Yeah.
That's another thing
Well,
that's
did
under
they?
discussed.
Because then they, maybe they don't trade for Russ. We were having this debate the other day. This is
True.
where the Lakers are at. That we were debating whether or not they would be in a better position having Dennis Schroeder for the next 3 years, making almost $20 million when he's out of the league right now, or the Russ contract.
Okay, a guy who can't even get the veterans minimum now, making 10 times as much as the veterans minimum, or having Russell Westbrook on your team making the super.
But
max.
you still have
Honestly,
one more first round pick, I think, in that scenario. So I don't, it's.
I actually think you might be right, and they
genuinely, I was making the argument that they would be better off. Like that's how
even
bad
if
it was.
they just trade, because what was the trade that everyone that was agreed to on draft night of 2020? Wasn't it Buddy Hield for Kuzma?
They could have kept Dennis still with that trade. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
His bird rights,
and they would have had KCP too.
Yeah, they would have still had KCP. They would have had Dennis, and they theoretically could have kept Caruso, but they're probably too cheap. They would have let him go anyway. But at that point, they could have had like Dennis, KCP, Caruso, an extra first, and they would have given up like Kuz and Montrezl Harrell for Buddy Hield.
Wow, I mean. Even then, if you go down that avenue, you're probably right. They probably are better right now. Who knows what happens with the Schroeder thing?
Yeah, who's to say? I don't think about it every day at all.
I've literally
I'm a hypocrite because I said the Russ trade was going to be good. I was excited about it. So look, I would have maybe made the same mistake, but yeah.
I talked myself into the Al Horford signing, and like we all do things that are psychotic when we're covering a team, when we're a fan of the team.
You just have to be willing to admit loudly when you were wrong and acknowledge when you are being a hypocrite by criticizing the team for the same thing that you praise them for.
Exactly. I will say though, my new rule is your gut feeling when something happens usually means that it's like if you think it's bad from the jump, it's probably bad from the jump. Like 9 times out of 10, like you talk yourself into the Horford signing, you talk yourself into the Rush trade, but the majority of the time it's bad, and it's bad. You're just coping and lying to yourself. And as I said, I've literally created a
sports fandom.
Yes, that's literally sports fandom. And it's also like I've created a podcast to just relive all the horrific things that the Sixers have done and tried to ruin my sports fandom life over here. So we're on the same page is what I'm trying to say, because I keep
just therapy. You're just healthily detaching yourself by reminding yourself of the bad times.
Exactly. This is a healthy coping mechanism with the Ball podcast. So I have the Pacers as my second one on here. I have the Jazz third. So the Jazz one, by the way, a week from today, you can make that trade. Because
Patrick Beverley is like legal to be traded a week
with
from today.
Players,
he's been like praising LeBron's tequila all summer, so we know that's like a real,
There you go. So if they make a trade like that, so it would be Russ for, let's say it's Bojan Bogdanovic, who has 1 year left on his deal. He's older. He's 33, 32. Patrick Beverley, who's also 33, 32. Once again, we're running into guys who have injury issues and are a little bit older. That might scare you if you're a Lakers fan, because, you have, let's say you could get Bev, Bojan, and then Jared Vanderbilt, or I guess for salary, it would probably make most sense to get like Jordan Clarkson, have
also
him
a clutch
back.
Client. So
run that back.
We know who's in the deal. I'm just saying,
So, let's say it's Clarkson, Bojan, and Patrick Beverley for Russ. And then what, because picks-wise, Danny Ainge is just going to want 27, 29, unprotected. Like, he's going to want everything. Yeah. And he's going to want that 28 swap too, by the way. He's not just stopping with that. Like, he's going to want.
I honestly am not sure offhand if they can do the 28 swap. I should know this, but I don't. So maybe they can.
If it's unprotected, they should be able to.
Okay.
That's the thing. If they trade 27 unprotected, yes. If they don't trade 20, let's say they trade it top 5 protected in 27, they can't trade the swap, because then it would move to the next year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, Utah has all their picks, I believe, except for maybe one pick left from the Mike Conley deal. But I think that one was used at this draft. So long story short, how many picks are you willing to give up in that kind of trade? Like, are you willing to give up 1 pick? Are you willing to give up 2? Are you willing to do 2 in a swap? What's the deal there? Because that makes you a pretty decent team. Once again, it's kind of like the Pacers deal, where it makes you a decent team, but I don't think it makes you a contender.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm actually lower on that one. As much as I love JC, like the person and the player, just like truly like joyful soul and like enjoyable player. And, but like I think that's a little worse than the Indiana deal. Like,
Yeah.
and so I would try, obviously, to do like a protected first. Again, Russ is expiring. The Jazz are trying to rebuild. They're trying to get off this money. Like, they don't necessarily want to pay. I think JC has like 2 years left on his deal or something like that. Like, I don't think he's an expiring. I think Pat Bev's an expiring. I think Bojan's an expiring, if I'm remembering correctly.
Both are.
Yeah.
They both are.
So, I mean, really, they'd just be getting off of like, I guess, Clarkson's money. So like maybe they'd want more. Maybe that is like worth a first to like get them to both take on Russ while still giving like helpful players. And then, maybe a first is fair there. I'm just like not that high on that trade. So I'd try to make it protected. But
is there anyone else you could sub in there? Like, because think about all the fucking contracts they have. They have Beasley now. You could trade. Technically, you could trade Mike Conley. Like, what does Mike Conley have a use for the Jazz? Really? Like, I mean, like, I don't think his market's going to be great. Like, I don't think that there's teams dying to get a 34-year-old injured.
If anything.
Yeah. Exactly, because he has 2 years, $40 million left.
I believe he has 2 years left. Yeah, and it's like a big money deal. Like, that's the thing about Russ is it's a gigantic contract. So like the sticker price is wild. He's not good. He's not going to help your team, at that price. But again, it's an expiring. So like an expiring contract can only be so bad. So that's why I think Lakers fans get so rankled up about the idea of like including both firsts in a lot of these packages, because it's like, are we getting that much better? And it's like Russ's contract isn't that bad. Like, it's in the fine. We're supposed to believe that like Russ got traded the last like 3 seasons on this deal, but it's so bad that now the Lakers have to attach 2 firsts to get him to move, on it when it's expiring. Like, that's kind of
but
the
it's
thing.
Really because you guys just have no leverage, because everyone knows how bad.
I mean, that's a big part of it for sure.
Yeah.
And so I get it why these other teams are asking for so much, but at the same time, I understand why the Lakers are sort of holding fast in some of these talks where they're like, no, we're not giving you both firsts for Buddy and Miles because we don't even know if that makes us a contender. So why are we giving you like both future first round picks when this contract isn't really that bad and that deal will probably still be there? So yeah, I'm sort of with you. Like, I think the Jazz trade is worse than the Indy one. I'd probably only do 1 first round pick for that deal.
Okay, so I still think that if I'm the Jazz, I'm like, I'm not bailing you out by only taking back 1 first round pick, but I'm certainly making you a better team. Bojan would be a great fit as he's a really good shooter. I know defensively he has some issues, but I think if you put Bev, LeBron, and AD around him, that they would cover up some of the issues. Certainly, I think that just having 3 defenders like that around him would make him certainly more playable. Who knows? Maybe
we got to say playoff LeBron, like, because I don't know the regular season LeBron is really helping you hide anyone.
But also, like, are you really worried about Bojan playing deep into the playoffs when you just missed the playoffs? Like, isn't the goal to get back to the playoffs and see what?
I was just clarifying that, like, LeBron, the plus defender is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he doesn't give a shit for 80 games of the regular season.
There was like 3 games where he really cared at center because he was getting all these blocks, and then he's like, "Fuck, this is kind of tiring." Like, I'm just gonna
37
let guys roll by me. It's all good. I'll call a switch. Like,
I don't really blame him at all. I do.
Yeah, no, neither do I. He's 37. Like,
You could. I will say, I think you could talk me into. I think I would give up 2 firsts in the Pacers deal and the Nets deal. I don't know if I would give up 2 firsts.
Into it for the Pacers deal. I wouldn't feel great about it, but that one I could be talked into it for, just because those 2 guys I think are just like such clear fit upgrades over Russ, like talent upgrades. It makes this team just make a ton more sense. Like, I would potentially be willing to do it, but I also understand why the Lakers are waiting it out to see, because like Utah also is not going to get more than 2 first round picks for those guys. Like, Buddy Hield is not a positive value contract. No. And so I think that's sort of where the impasse is at. And like Indy, we know they're going to move Miles Turner. Like, he's not staying there after this season. Like, that doesn't seem particularly likely.
They just try to get
why the Lakers are holding fast.
No. And so I think I could talk myself into giving up 2 firsts there. I definitely wouldn't do 2 firsts in a swap for any deal but the Kyrie deal. especially because I think I'd probably try to just get at least one or two of maybe both of the picks to the Pacers, like slightly protected, maybe top 3 protected, like 3 or 4. Like,
if you're protecting them, then maybe that like sort of like that allows you to meet in the middle on the Pacers deal, and that's how they get both picks. Because like I would not do that deal for just the 2 firsts, like straight up no protections. Like I just don't think
that makes sense.
like that's not anywhere close to what the value on the market is for those guys. So I get why the Lakers again like are sort of waiting.
Yeah, and Sam Vecini said on his podcast, like he did hear that the Pacers got some decent offers for Miles Turner in this past draft.
Yeah.
With like higher picks. Like my guess, if I'm just throwing out there, I'm assuming the Charlotte Hornets offered one of their first round picks for him. Which was a lottery pick, but it was the end of the lottery. And also a lot of people weren't crazy about this class. Like it's possible the Pacers were just like, we got Mathurin, like he was our guy. Like we don't really care about getting another young player in here. We'd rather keep Miles and see what we can get. And once again, valuing the quality of pick where you're projecting forward and you're thinking like Kevin Pritchard is their GM still. I think he's probably got pretty good job security. I would imagine maybe he's willing to go pretty far into the future for those picks. So I mean, like, I think Miles Turner, I even think that, like, I go back and forth on Miles Turner. He's one of those guys where I'm like, is he underrated? Because, like, most fans don't really, like, casual fans aren't talking about Miles Turner, but is he overrated just because I listen to a ton of fucking podcasts and my brain is poisoned? Like,
you always have to sort of like translate that in your brain a little bit and like argue with yourself. Like, I think honestly, I feel like he's become weirdly underrated over the last year. Like he's still, especially, you know, alongside AD, they're sort of like tailor-made in a lab to cover up for each other's weaknesses and augment each other's strengths. Like that's why, again, at the trade deadline, I was kind of banging the drum. Like they got to try and get Miles Turner. That's the only way that you're potentially salvaging this season is if you sort of double down on size. It's the only way that you're going to have anything close to a good enough defense to do anything of note in the playoffs. Like you're not going to get enough wings to become this like suddenly switchy team that can play. Like maybe you can kind of like get it with the Twin Towers like the Lakers had in the 2020 title run, even though, you know, they were at their best when they were small with AD playing the 5. But to get there, you know, Miles Turner, again, like he can at least play alongside him credibly. And like they can make up for a lot for each other on defense.
Is there a world where like you trade for Miles Turner and it's almost like, I know he's a little bit older, so it's not like a perfect 1-for-1 comp, but it kind of becomes like the Jared Allen situation where like, oh shit, you get him with another really good creator, like they got him with Garland, LeBron obviously being the creator in LA.
I thought you meant Russ.
Yeah, no, he's actually staying on the team in this situation somehow.
Yeah, Russ was listening to this whole podcast. He's like, you're right. I think I could make Miles Turner better. Like when they trade.
That's LeBron what they need to do to unlock him. There you go.
Yeah.
LeBron. So like you have another great defender in AD, Mobley being the great defender in Cleveland to kind of have multiple rim protectors, guys who can capably guard outside from time to time. Like, I do wonder if there's a situation, like, I don't think he's going to make an all-star team, but he could certainly have, with working off of LeBron and AD's gravity on offense, mixed in with the fact that, like, he's a capable shooter. I think he might even be a little bit overrated as a shooter. Like, I think people think that he's like Kat or Jokic or Embiid. Like, he's not even that good in terms of like stepping out and shooting, but he's a capable above average 3-point shooter who's a willing one, which is an important thing when you want to be a stretch big.
He shot below, like he shot like 33% last year. He's like career 35-ish. Like,
he's fine. Like for a center, he's good, but for an overall player, he's average. And I wonder if they could talk themselves into that situation where, like, I mean, Miles Turner's still young enough. I think he's like 25 somehow still. And you can talk yourself into that. And, like, you know, Buddy Hield, he'll always have his defensive issues, but the shooting working off those two is probably going to be insane. He's the value that Buddy Hield, and I've always wanted to see Buddy Hield on a good team for this reason, is that he just puts up threes at a rate that almost no other player in the NBA except for like Steph does. Like, it's like Steph, Jordan Poole, Clay. It's like the 3 Warriors guys.
I love that Jordan Poole's in there. That's amazing.
I think like per 100, he shoots almost. I think he shoots like literally. He might be the most, other than Steph, might be the most willing 3-point shooter in the NBA. And Buddy, because like Buddy, it's like for years it was always like leading the league. It was like Steph, Buddy, Harden were like the three guys that were like putting up the most threes, and that's extremely important when you're working off of LeBron and AD because. As we know, LeBron always thrives in those kind of situations, and it doesn't hurt in any situation when you have those kind of floor spaces around him. And like, I even think Buddy could get better looks there. And then you're talking about a guy who's willing to put up 10 threes a game and might shoot 40%. Like, holy shit. Like, that's really unlocking offensively. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, I mean, he would easily get better looks.
I'm being told right now, Van Fleet, Donovan Mitchell, and Steph Curry were actually in terms of attempts last year. So Van Fleet's up there, but Mitchell, most of his are coming off of pull-ups. So I'm generally speaking talking about like off-ball guys, and Buddy would fit into that mold.
And fans of Buddy Hield would say that too many of his are off the dribble. You know, I think
he was fifth last year, Buddy
yeah,
Hield.
okay. I think I mean I'm with you on that. Like his looks are going to be way better, and it's like, you know, the whole problem with the Lakers right now, if you actually are still like kind of under the belief that they will bring Russ into camp or whatever, which I'm still not there yet. Like until he is actually at training camp and we're getting updates, I'm like, no, him and LeBron, you know, they're getting along. LeBron didn't invite him to the players only mini camp, but it's fine. They're getting along. And so until that's happening, I'm not really willing to believe that they're going to go into camp with Russ. Like, I just don't know why you'd waste everybody's time. And so, you know, but if you're looking at this team on paper right now, the problem is there's like, you can't even do you can't even go like teams always talk about now. It's like, oh, we're going 4 out. We're going 5 out. Like the Lakers can go like 2 out right now with this roster in most lineups, you know? And so like Buddy Hield, just by virtue of being far and away the best 3-point shooter on this roster. Right. And then all of a sudden sort of you start to open up the floor for LeBron and AD. Then all of a sudden Buddy's getting more open looks because those guys are, you know, they have space to dribble a little bit or like get to the basket. And yeah, you can see why they had interest in him last summer because he is the guy, the type of guy that in theory, despite his flaws, despite his contract not being the best, like should be able to provide them good basketball value.
Yeah, I think that the fit is like a glove. Like I've wanted to see the 3 teams that I've always been most interested to see Buddy Hield on would be the Warriors, Lakers, and Sixers. Because I've always felt like those teams had good enough defensive infrastructure, always could use more shooting, and it could make the offense like
the Bucks would be interesting too, I think.
The Bucks too, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, honestly, the Heat too with their movement system. Yeah. I could see him thriving there as well.
The Nets when they run it back with KD and Kyrie, you know,
Ben Simmons covering up for Buddy.
Yeah,
you know.
They just have like he's like Ben Simmons Remora fish. They just only play lineups with like Seth Curry, Ben. You know, they're all like tied. Ben and Buddy, they're all tied to each other.
Yeah, he's, you know, the 2016 draft. Buddy will celebrate his 30th birthday at the end of this year somehow, which is amazing. We really have not made enough that there's an NBA player in the league that has openly admitted that they lied on their birth certificate. Which rocks, by the way. Which rocks.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Because what's funny is that if he was a year older, he might not have, I think 24 like the oldest you can be. Or did they change that rule in the draft? I can't even remember. But I'm pretty sure 24 is the oldest you can be and enter the draft. And he was literally like right at the cutoff. He still would have been able to be in the draft because I think he was 23 at the time of the draft and he was really 24. So it was like the Chris Duarte situation. They're just collecting the oldest young players in the NBA in Indiana. But I don't think you can. I think if he was 25, I don't think he would have been able to join the draft. I think you have to be 24 and below, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and you know who helped him get through that whole process? Rob Pelinka.
There you go. I know. I'm a fucking sicko. I rewatch drafts all the time. Like I just have while I'm working, I'll just have them on in the background. And I was rewatching, and when you brought up the Buddy Hield thing, I was like, oh, I watched the draft the other night, and I was like, oh, Rob Pelinka was his agent. I didn't even know that. He's sitting right there.
Yeah, no, because I remember this because there was this whole like funny thing where like Kobe came out like really hard stumping for like Buddy Hield's draft stock. And I was like, why is like Kobe so into this like Buddy? And then I looked it up and it's like, oh, they share an agent. Like,
yeah. He's like, look, I love him. Not enough to draft him over Brandon Ingram, but I love this guy. Yeah, it was the Shabazz
He actually
Napier
pushed
thing.
pretty hard for like the Lakers to consider him. Like he was really like bringing it up a lot. Like
Wow.
he kind of stumped for him. Yeah,
Good,
it was.
this is why you don't listen to your players all the time.
Well, this is the first
one
thing
thing we've
that
learned from this podcast. LeBron, KD, like
do not ever listen. Like if a player thinks someone's good, run away. Like
yeah.
yeah. No, I think like the thing that I always look for when players like seemingly out of nowhere praise a young player is like, oh, are they at the same agency? And like 90% of the time the answer is yes. Like I remember
100%.
this from Team USA in like 2016 or whatever. It was like they had the select team, and Paul George just like out of nowhere was like, yeah, Julius Randle and D'Angelo Russell just like really killing it out there. Like just look really, really good, really ready to play. Those guys have a bright future. And everybody took it as like, oh, he wants to be a Laker. Like he's like flirting with them, whatever. And then you look it up and it's like, oh, like they're all Aaron Mintz clients. And so,
There you
yeah.
go. They always have the same agents. That is a very common theme.
It's like 90% of the time. If a player
100%.
is like going really hard for a young player, it's because it's like, oh, like they worked out with the guy during the summer and they think he's
The
a nice
only
kid.
exception is if it's a hooper, because the hoopers
Yeah.
will just tell the truth. Ja, KD, they'll tweet about a guy. Trey, if they tweet about a guy, it's just because they genuinely are like, he rocks.
Perk,
Like he's awesome. Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. The truest of all hoopers.
Yes.
But let's just get into let's wrap it up here. But let's talk about the last three teams that could potentially ever have some sort of offer. If there's anything that you could be remotely interested in, which are the Hornets, Knicks, and Spurs. Because I don't think that any of these teams, those three teams are like the realistic trades, the one we talked about. Like, I think it's got to be some variation of the Jazz guys. We know what the Pacers deal looks like. We know what the Nets deal looked like. Take your pick from the Jazz guys. If they include Jared Vanderbilt in that, I might be a little bit enticed. If I'm the Lakers, I think that he could be like a really good, nice fit there as well. But like when you talk about the Hornets, Knicks, and Spurs, is there anyone on that team? Like, are you interested in a Gordon Hayward, try to revive his career? Are you interested in
the Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier thing? Like I can sort of see why the Lakers would be interested in those guys. But again, it's like you're not attaching multiple first round picks to make that sort of deal. Like that's like a almost neutral value deal where you're giving them something just because it's like, yeah, we can't go into camp with Russ and you're doing us a favor and giving us a player that fits better because they're not Russ. Like it's like literally like almost any player would fit better. And like Gordon Hayward, the injury stuff is sort of concerning. And it's like if you're it's like building a house on sand a little bit, where it's like, okay, like our core is like gonna turn 38 in December, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Gordon Hayward. And it's like, well, I guess everybody cross your fingers that those guys are going to be healthy in June. And, maybe that team could be good. And it's like on paper, that looks like, like decent kind of core where like it's Gordon Hayward kind of gives them the wing depth that they're looking for. Decent shooter. Like, he'd be okay in Los Angeles, certainly a better fit than Russ. But again, it's like the health stuff concerns you a little bit. And especially after how injury ravaged they were last year, I think that's a big part of the reason why those talks didn't really get very far, was that the Hornets were sort of like, you got to give us picks. And the Lakers were like, well, we don't want injured guys. And, And so the Knicks one, not super interesting. Like Julius Randle is like a better locker room chemistry version of like the same problem as Russ on like a worse contract. So like, I just don't really, again, like I enjoy Julius. I think that he's a little undervalued right now. I just don't really see the fit here with the Lakers. And sorry, what was the other team?
The last team that I had in here was the Spurs, just because the Spurs can pretty easily absorb Russ. The thought with the Spurs that I had, because I agree with you on the Hornets and the Knicks things, I think it's too much of a risk. You probably have to give up too much. You're not taking on Julius Randle's long-term contract.
It's not like you make that deal with the first attached and you're like, Gordon Hayward comes in here and solves all our problems.
I mean, look, like, Gordon Hayward, when he's healthy, is still a very good NBA player.
But
it's
help.
Just,
if he's healthy, it's just, but
exactly.
Like, it's a lot of ifs.
It's too much of a risk. I think Terry Rozier, very similar to the Buddy Hield thing, would be a fantastic fit. I've always said he's kind of like, if Steph was a role player, is what he's kind of become with the Hornets, like as a shooter, as a hooper.
I think Seth is if Steph was a role player, but
I actually disagree. I think Seth plays more like Del Curry than he plays like Steph. I think because if you watch Rozier shoots off movement even more than Steph. He's a more willing 3-point shooter then he's a
I
better
was going
shooter
to say
than
more
Steph.
than Steph. You're not making a
Yeah.
very good case for him right now. That's like all-time bad shot selection.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But in terms of volume, in terms of difficulty of shot, in terms of movement, in terms of all that, I think Rozier's a little bit more of a equivalent in terms of it being a much worse version, obviously.
Yeah.
But the Spurs I included on here, the Knicks I would have no interest in any deal that I don't like really anyone on that Knicks team.
People were trying to get excited like last trade deadline about like it's like, oh, you get like Fournier and like this other stuff
Kemba.
and like you give up Russ and they fit better, so maybe that makes you a contender. And it's like, I don't know that I'm there. I'm just I respect your desire to get off of the Russ contract, but I don't think that fixes the team.
Not worth giving up picks for. Maybe if it's just like a whatever, like you take on longer money thing, but certainly not worth giving up picks for. And then which is what all these teams are going to want. But the Spurs are the last one I had on here. The only reason I had the Spurs is because the Spurs are one of the few teams with cap space that can just take in and you can get.
Yeah, the Spurs are like we just want to dump him and just not have him on the team, basically.
And maybe you give up like one heavily protected pick. And the Spurs just are like, look, we'll just buy you out or just let you do whatever you want. We're tanking next year anyway. Who gives a shit? And we send you Doug McDermott and Josh Richardson and we call it a day. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where like you get like maybe a pretty decent sized trade exception. You still have your other pick. You're only giving up a heavily protected pick. And you still have your swap if you want to go out there or whatever. Oh, you can't trade your swap in that case, but you can just trade. You have your other pick, a trade exception, some tradable salaries, and some guys that as Josh Richardson and Doug McDermott are flawed players, they might be the third and fourth best player on the Lakers right now.
That is so depressing.
I know.
Yeah, I think like that deal is obviously, again, like that's last resort. Like you just can't do anything. You for some reason don't want to just like send him home. I guess either the principle of it or you don't want to pay a guy to just like not play. But like, yeah, I mean, that's the one that Lakers fans I think honestly have to be most worried about is like, like if Kurt Rambis explains to Jeannie Buss that she can get out of paying Russ by just like attaching a first and sending him to San Antonio and like not have to save anyone, like they might attach a first like and a couple hacked PS5s. Like it's,
Yeah, no, she might be willing to move those units to get off that deal and not have to pay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be. We came up with this theory on our podcast, but it would be the perfect crime if she just like robbed a bunch of people by faking a hacking PS5s, and then it's like, okay, we saved up enough money. Now it's easier to pallet the Russ buyout.
Well, look, when you own a struggling small business like the Lakers, you got to do whatever you can to cut corners and
PPP loans, defrauding people for non-existent PS5s. All of these things are
exactly they're in the same basket of.
They're on the table.
Yeah, exactly. We're willing to do anything to get off this Russ contract. Believe me. If you don't believe me, I'm willing to slang some PS5s out there in DMs. Very, very sketchy. But
no, you got to DM someone else to get them. My favorite part of that whole thing. I'm sorry, I keep taking us on tangents.
No, you're good. You're good. It was. Have you ever listened to this podcast? That's all I fucking do.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you did. Yeah. I won't share your description for this podcast from off air, but my favorite part of that whole saga was people that were DMing the hackers and sort of being like, "Oh, well, will you throw in Talen Horton-Tucker?" And the hacker was like, "Yeah, sure. Just DM my assistant."
Yeah, I'll take THT. Fuck it.
You're like, THT, I don't really know what that is, but sure. Like, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, Kendrick Nunn? Sure, yeah, whatever. Send him over.
If the hacker had a sense of humor, they would have been like, well, no, I mean, we can't give up Talen in that deal, too. Like, that's just like, we believe he's going to have a bounce back year, like.
Yeah. I'm not selling Xboxes here. I'm selling PS5s. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on now. But my final ranking on this, Nets in their own tier, Pacers in their own tier, second tier, Jazz in their own tier, third tier, and then I have my last tier, which is Hornets, Knicks, and Spurs, which I don't think are realistic. And I think
feel
Spurs
like Hornets are above Knicks and Spurs. Like that's like
I have that.
Just like okay, yeah.
Okay,
I feel like
true,
it's in like its own tier above. Like I don't even consider that like the compare like Gordon Hayward or Terry Rozier. It's the Rozier. Sorry, I never know how you pronounce that, but is still like better enough to me than what the Knicks can offer, at least in terms of fit, that I'd put that in a tier
in
above
the Jazz tier. Yeah. The Jazz and Hornets
that doesn't even get you anything. Yeah, like the Spurs and Knicks one are just like you know.
I also just don't think the Hornets one's realistic at all now because of the
Yeah, I don't
situation
think
that
so
they
either.
have with that piece of shit. But the fact that they just don't have enough talent, like they're not going to do that. But all things considered,
Yeah, I really thought going into the offseason, that was almost my, like, not my favorite one personally. That was like my odds-on favorite for the one to happen. It just seemed
right?
like, Jordan gets to rehabilitate a Jordan Brand guy, it's only for a year. They sell some tickets. Like yeah. The
Yeah,
Lakers
that
get back like a wing and a guard that, maybe they're not the most reliable, but it's like a better fit. Like that one felt to me like the most likely going
they're
into the
good players
offseason.
too.
And then all the
Like,
Kyrie stuff happened and it just kind of all fell apart.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, if I had to guess right now, I think the Pacers deal is the one that's going to happen. I
That
think
does
that
feel like the most likely right now, just because just who knows when the Nets are going to even do
yep,
this. And I just feel like the Lakers, I don't think if you're the Lakers, you can go into camp with Russ like showing up. So you either send him home or you make a deal now. And I
yep,
don't know that they're going to send him home either, because then it's like, LeBron has to answer questions every single day at training camp about like, oh, like, it sure would be nice if Russ was here after that like 3 turnover game from Taylor Horton Tucker in the preseason, right? It's like,
yeah.
and he's like, no, it wouldn't.
It's a
Thanks.
bad
Next
look,
question.
and also it would fuck up the trade talks. Like I think
Yeah.
I guess Pacers deal, and it gets done before the season, and we will be blessed with slop once again.
Yeah.
All right, Harrison, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to follow Harrison, I will put his Twitter in the description. If you want clutch propaganda, all of that, be sure to follow.
I'm going to be telling you about how Lonnie Walker, again, like ended up being one of the best value signings of the offseason.
Take that, Tim. Take that in your B-ball index calculator.
Yeah, you stupid analytics.
Peace, dude.